everybody. These breathless, airless days. You like being in the Sahara Desert, isn't it, really? Welcome to our August Development Committee. I'm Pauline Grove Jones for the members of the public, and I'll be chairing this Development Committee. And I have the officers who will provide and present the applications and technical advice sitting either side of me. And in front of me, in serried rows, are the members of the committee who will make the decisions on the items. So can the officers introduce themselves? To the left first.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the Development Management and Major Projects Manager. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Lauren Gregory. I'm Democratic Services Officer and will be minute taking this meeting.
Good morning, I'm Fiona Crook. Oh, sorry. Good morning, I'm Jane Owen, Senior Planning Officer, Presenting Officer today.
Morning, I'm Fiona Croxon, Solicitor to the Council.
Thank you so much. And just to tell you that if the fire alarm goes off, the members know this anyway, but it's just as well to remind you as well as the members of the public. If the fire alarm goes off, it's real. So just make calmly, if you can, for the exits, which are to my right, to my left, two on the left-hand side, and go down the stairs to the front or rear of the building. Please don't take the lifts. And if you have mobile phones, please turn them off or put them on silent. Okay. Now we're going to go to the agenda. Apologies for absence, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Fitch-Tillett, Councillor Varley and Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Substitutes?
Councillor John Toy is present as a substitute for Councillor Varley.
Thank you. Now, the minutes of the last meeting, as you can see, pages 1 to 10, I will not go through them. I'm assuming, hopefully, I know you all do this very carefully, that you have read the minutes. Are there any alterations to be made? And I have a proposer to accept this as approved. Councillor Kershaw, seconder. Councillor Whittington. Hands please raised. Acceptance. Unanimous. Thank you. Items of urgent business, Lauren.
There are no items of urgent business, Chairman.
The order of business, as there's only one application, will stay as it is. Now, declarations of interest, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Councillor Holliday.
I have an interest in item 8. I'm predisposed.
You're predisposed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll abstain or not.
Well, if you're predisposed, you have to abstain, as far as I know.
Right, I'm predisposed.
No. What's
Let me just hello to the hearing.
Yeah, I thought predisposed means that you predetermined. Yes, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So sorry, I always get this confused. No, you are supposed to.
Predisposed means that you're still willing to listen to any new evidence
right.
that comes to light.
You have a slight feeling on one side that you're willing to listen. Yeah, I always get that confused. And predetermined means you've made your mind up and you're not going to hear anything else. Right. At least we know that now, and I know it. Okay, thank you, Victoria. Now we're straight on to item 8, officers' reports. And Jane, you're going to introduce, please. This is PF/21/3073, page 17.
Okay, so this application is for the demolition of an existing single-storey dwelling and construction of 2 dwellings at 43 New Road, Blakeney. There's one correction in the report on page 18. The Norfolk Coast Partnership is down as objecting. However, in the paragraph below, it says they raised no major objections, but they have raised concerns regarding glazing and the risk of light spills. So they're not objecting, they have raised concerns. So I'm going to go straight into the slides. So in terms of location, the site lies on the eastern side of New Road, sorry, the eastern side of New Road, where in the settlement boundary of Blakeney, where the principle of development is acceptable. This slide shows the part of the conservation area boundary and the position of the site within it. So you can see it lies on the southern boundary. It's approximately 200 metres from the main high street in Blakeney. So this is an aerial photograph which shows the siting of the existing bungalow, roughly central in the site. To the north, there's a bungalow, and to the south, there's a two-storey dwelling. Which, the dwellings to the north are numbers 41B and 41 New Road, and to the south is a two-storey dwelling, which is 45 New Road. This slide shows the proposed layout of the two dwellings which replace the existing bungalow. Usefully shows the relationship with the surrounding dwellings. The proposed dwelling on plot 1 would sit only slightly forward of number 45 to the south, and it would be set further back from the highway from 41B, which is the bungalow immediately to the north. The form and character of New Road is generally modern, detached, single story, one and a half, two-storey dwellings, a variety of different scale and massings, and generally development is set back from the highway, and development is also set within a variety of different plot sizes. This gives a more detailed idea of some of the more recent development in the vicinity of the site and the variety and different densities, which I've also referred to in the report on page 23. There is a precedent for backland development, which is highlighted in yellow, and there is a mixture of development of different densities, as you can see. So on to floor plans. This is the floor plan for the dwelling proposed on plot 1. The garage to the north is actually the garage that would serve plot 2. This is the floor plan for the bungalow, which is proposed to the rear of the site. Just whiz through some elevations. This is the front elevation that will be facing New Road for plot 1. Rear elevation, the northern side elevation, which is the elevation would face towards the 41 and 41B. Southern side of elevation, and on to plot 2. This would be the west front facing elevation, so it effectively faced towards the rear of plot 1. Rear elevation, plot 2, and north. I just highlight on this that one of the roof lights that was previously proposed within the northern facing roof slope has been removed from the scheme. This is the southern facing side elevation and the garage that would serve plot 2. There's some indicative aerial views which usefully shows some 3D images of how the development would look. I'll just point out that some of the proposed new landscaping would actually enclose the site at the front. It's open at the moment, and you'll be able to see that clearer when I get onto the photographs. Some street elevations which shows how the street scene looks at the moment and how it would look with the new development. So you can see that plot 1 sits comfortably within the range of heights of the other dwellings within the street scene. It's quite a varied street scene. So this is a layout again, which shows the proposed new planting. The application is supported by a tree replacement plan, which proposes 11 replacement trees and 3 new boundary hedges. So some photographs. which shows the relationship with neighbouring properties. I've highlighted 41B and 41 New Road to the north, and the existing bungalow, which faces north at the moment, so it doesn't face towards the highway, in contrast to number 45 on the other side. I'd just point out here that there's no windows in the southern facing side elevation of number 45. Slightly wider picture. A street scene picture, you can see that it's quite open at the open site frontage at the moment. This shows the newer development on the opposite side of the road. And in the other direction. So the main issues are the impact within the A and B conservation area and impact on neighbouring amenity. These are all discussed on pages 21, 22 and 23 of the officer's report. The recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Owen. I'll now turn to speakers. We have a speaker from the parish, Mr. Donohoe, Mr. Alban Donohoe. I do beg your pardon. I'm on your name. Would you please come up to the front? Would you like to sit at the first one? Yes, please. Fiona will show you which little button to push because it's not that easy.
Yeah.
You have 10 minutes.
Well, I won't need that.
From the time you start. 3 minutes. Do you know, I really am. I think I'm going to have to go and reside in an old people's home. I think 3 minutes, not 10. Thank God we haven't got 10 minutes. No, just because it's so long.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alban Donohoe. I'm representing Blakeney Parish Council. First thing I'd like to say is that the Conservation Area Appraisal Design Guide for Blakeney describes the new road as open and leafy, with the road characterised by houses being set back. It was stated by the proposed changes that the new development would preserve and enhance the character of this area, but Blakeney Parish Council don't agree with this application. Whilst I was acknowledging the size of the plot, we do still think that it's overdevelopment of the ground, and Blakeney has seen far too many single houses being knocked down and 2 houses being replaced, which is having a major impact on our infrastructure within the village. And one of the other things that we're looking at is that the A or NB should be severely looked after. It's our priority of keeping that going, and I think that the more and more of developments like this, it is just undermining that going on. The case officer said that this proposed development would preserve and enhance characterise the area, but again, Blakeney Parish Council disagree with this, and they said that the design and the modern infill of Blakeney, there are a lot of houses on that road there that are circa 1950s and are set back, and they're set back with big gardens at the front and big gardens at the back, and we think that this new development is coming forward and pushing forward. And another thing that we're objecting to is the significant amount of glazing. Blakeney, like many parishes around here, has a dark skies policy, and the amount of glazing that is going in will still, yet another house with glazing lights left on, it detracts from the dark skies policy. So if the development does go on out, we would like that some kind of issue could be taken up with the amount of glazing to stop that going on. Plot 1 is also near the road, and it's overhanging the line of the building line that is pushing forward further than the original building line where the houses are set back. We think that either this could be changed by either the plot 1 house moving back, or the T-junction section, which you can see coming down onto the road, be shortened so that we're not making a precedent for people rebuilding houses and pushing that borderline further and further forward. Is that my 3 minutes? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I okay to start? Yes. Okay, thank you. I'm Joyce Sutcliffe, and I would like to express my thanks and appreciation to the officers and members of the different committees whose recommendations and guidance have shaped the report that you're going to discuss today. Firstly, and to respond to the dark sky policy concerns, we propose light sensitive switches that would close all the roof blinds at dusk. Coupled with significant reduction in roof lights to plot 2 and our essential need for curtains and blinds to all windows, we strongly feel that we have addressed any and all concerns raised. External lighting will also be carefully designed to reduce light spillage, and solar glazing will be installed where necessary. I do not regard this as my planning application. It's very much the product of months of collaboration with our neighbours. Our neighbours have been very influential in shaping the design and layout of the site. They've been a constant support, and their willingness to contribute their ideas and share their knowledge, particularly the input from our 2 close neighbours at 41 and 41A New Road, who sit on the local neighbourhood planning committee, has been invaluable. From the very start of our dream to settle at 43 New Road, Blakeney, we made contact with all the surrounding neighbours, and those that were in permanent residence responded. Occupiers of second homes and holiday homes at the rear of our site on High Street and Samphire Close chose not to engage in this process. My career is as an accountant. However, in later years, I made a career change to teach business studies to students in a deprived area of Hull. It was my job to inspire these students to reach for the stars, to fulfill their potential, and to grab every opportunity. This application is my opportunity, and it's my dream. My husband Tony and I have holidayed in Blakeney for over 40 years, and my heart's there. I may not have been born in Blakeney, but I do intend to die there. It's my dream to live and take an active role in preserving a part of the world that respects nature, dark skies, community, and history. As an applicant, I feel we have acted with the utmost compassion and professionalism throughout this process. This has led to us a sympathetic design proposal in keeping with the surrounding area that now has the full support of the planning case officer and conservation design officer. I hope that all of you will vote unanimously for this application. As your conservation and design officer states, this proposal would preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the Blakeney conservation area, which is exactly what we and our neighbours intended. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to say what this planning application means to me and my husband. Thank you.
We now go to the local member, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, ma'am. There is community concern that this determination does not seem to have paid much attention to aspects of Blakeney's conservation area appraisal, and similarly to the North Norfolk Design Guide. There is also community concern that this development will set the scene for replacement dwellings on New Road for many years to come. The conservation area appraisal gives the defining features of New Road as modern detached properties set back from the road in generous plots, typically red brick and flint in a traditional style. The appraisal also says hedges and trees lining the road and in private gardens. However, my interpretation of the site layout diagram is that the dwelling on plot 1 sits in front of the building line between 45 to the south and 41B to the north. This development also proposes a brick wall frontage, albeit planted with a hedge, which will take years to mature. The appraisal says any proposed development should be carefully considered, avoiding overdevelopment and being sensitive to the existing street pattern, scale and materials. Again, please consider the positioning of the dwelling on plot 1. I absolutely agree with neighbours' concerns about overlooking had the dwelling on plot 1 been further back. However, I suggest that this could have been remediated. Could the one window in the north elevation, which seems to me would overlook, be removed or made of opaque glass, as this room has a substantial window on the west elevation? I would have thought then the house on plot 1 could safely be positioned further back. Community feedback is that the dwelling on plot 2 will be overbearing and overshadowing to neighbouring properties, the ridge height being only 21 centimetres less than the 1.5-storey gable of plot 1. The community also feels the northern elevation runs very close to a neighbouring property. 3 windows, including the one that has been angled away from one neighbour, overlooks another neighbouring property. Boundary planting has been removed, so there is now no visual break between the 2 properties. The conservation appraisal says any new development must be appropriate in terms of scale, massing, design and materials. The application does not give the footprint of plot 1, but it would appear to be significantly greater than neighbouring properties. I may be incorrect, but by my calculation, the footprint of plot 2 is 416 square metres. Conservation philosophy highlighted in the appraisal states that there will be a presumption in favour of retention of existing mature trees for all new developments. Community feedback is that in this case there has been clearance of pre-existing trees and hedges. The North Norfolk Design Guide says new development will generally only be permitted if they achieve a high standard of design which is compatible with the character and appearance of the area, are compatible with the scale, mass, form and siting of existing buildings and their settings. The dwelling on plot 1 seems to have been compared to a house not in the conservation area. Plot 2 has not had the benefit of the conservation assessment. The footprint of both houses are significantly greater than neighbouring houses. The design guide says windows should be of a size and proportion that sit comfortably within the elevation as a whole. Where infill development is considered, the position of windows will be crucial in determining whether the new building fits with its surrounds. Hence, window sills and arch levels need careful consideration to ensure the scheme is compatible with the street scene. Some of the windows in both plot 1 and 2 are proposed to be almost floor to ceiling. The guide says of windows, the use of timber remains the preferred option on visual and sustainability grounds. Aluminium windows are proposed. Norfolk Coastal Partnership has expressed concerns about the quantum of glazing on the west elevation, threatening the dark skies, which are a feature of the AONB. I see on the east elevations all windows to be installed with automatic blackout blinds or curtains. I don't see any mitigation for this on the west and north elevations, so I want that clarified in order to allay concerns regarding light spill. I do not think this proposal conforms with core strategies EN 1, 2, 4 and 8.
Thank you, Victoria. I now go to members. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Lloyd. Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's good about this is that the applicant has been working closely with our officers and they've overcome many of the problems before coming to committee. I like the planting scheme that they've gone further than they need to with that. And I like the innovative way of dealing with the night skies, that the blinds come down at dusk, if I understood that correctly. For my point, it's disappointing that there's no reference to climate change matters in the construction of these buildings. I know they don't have to. I'm just disappointed that we're in a climate emergency and people don't make reference to solar. I know that the second bungalow has solar on it, but there's nothing about it in the report, which is disappointing from my point of view. I've just got a question for officers too. On page 21, number 2, impact on AONB, cumulative effect on AONB. it says that, I'll find it, there we go. Policy EM1 provides that the impact of individual proposals and their cumulative effect on the AMB and its settings will be carefully assessed. So my question is to officers, the cumulative effect, I mean, what's the tipping point here? I note that this application site is surrounded by other infill building already. At what point do officers feel that the community effect has reached a tipping point?
I mean, it's one of those difficult questions to answer, isn't it? Because it depends on what your interpretation of where the tipping point lies. I mean, clearly we're not just making individual decisions. We're looking at how that fits in with the development that it's surrounding. Obviously, in this case, we've looked at surrounding development. We've looked at what the character is of the area. Obviously, measures that have been put in place to try and minimise light spill, because I think that's the primary concern about light spill and the impact on the special qualities of the AMB, and I think steps have been taken to address that. So from our perspective, we've addressed the concern and have ways to secure that by conditions in the planning permission. So but it's a subject for I mean, members have an influence in terms of how we interpret policy, because you're the decision maker at committee. So if you had a particular view on something, obviously you could articulate that for your decision making, but obviously we have to, if we do go down if we were to go down a particular route, we'd have to be able to evidence why we're going down that route and demonstrate the decisions that we're making. We feel that we've addressed the key issues. We've had consultees consider carefully those points, and they've responded saying they're satisfied that the development complies with development plan policy.
Just reply.
Yeah, that's good. So how long's a piece of string, basically? Well, I'll make my opinion as a committee member on this. I think the plot is big enough to sustain 2 properties on it, in my personal opinion, and therefore I won't be opposing this application. So, and
Are you proposing this, Nigel?
I knew you were going to ask me. Yeah, I'll propose it. But I also think the particular nature of this application site, where it's surrounded by other infill buildings, has influenced my decision on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Withington.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification. There's been talk about how far forward this is along the building line. What is actually the distance that this building line has moved forward?
Jane, can you answer that one, or do you want Jeff to answer it again?
I don't have the actual figure, but I'd say it's no more than
It was what?
I would say that it's probably less than a metre.
Right.
Is this correct? It's less than a metre. Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Can I add another quick question?
Yes,
in
for
as well?
sure.
In terms of it, I mean, I drive along that road quite regularly, and it is at the moment with the open landscape, it is quite different to the rest of the area in that there are hedges. I see the landscape officer has said that it's it should be included, that it's in accordance, the landscaping's in accordance with what's in here. Are we able to actually specify that that hedge, even if the wall is built, should be retained? Because I think that's quite a significant factor for the curbside appeal of it. And obviously an environmental factor as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Councillor Lloyd jumps up and down.
Is that in the recommendations? Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's under the landscaping work shall be carried out in accordance with the approved details, but I couldn't see anywhere that it specifies the hedge.
Yes, it does. Any tree, shrub or hedgerow forming part of the approved landscape scheme which dies is removed or becomes seriously damaged or diseased within a period of 5 years, shall be replaced.
Okay,
the
but
next
after
planting
that, after 5 years, can it then be removed?
Now that I don't know. I don't know why we've said just 5 years. Is it then reviewed again, Jeff?
I mean, we typically with planning applications, we try to make sure any planting that goes in is protected until it's established. So in North Norfolk, typically 5 years, but in some cases 10 years is a period where we would need longer establishment periods where you're in more exposed areas. Obviously, the landscape officer here has said 5 years is sufficient. Obviously, after that time, yes, people could remove the hedging. Obviously, we don't want them to do that, but we can't have a condition that says forever and a day you have to keep the landscaping, because it just becomes too onerous on the local planning authority to monitor and manage all of these sort of schemes. Clearly, you're in a conservation area, so if any of those specimens get above a certain size for trees and that sort of thing, then they become protected by being in the conservation area. But obviously, the idea is for that hedging to be put in place and be retained and maintained thereafter.
And I
Thank
think
you.
if they wish to remove it, then they have to apply for planning permission to do so, I believe, Jeff, is that not so? It is in a conservation area.
And not necessarily for hedging, but for tree specimens, they would definitely over a certain trunk diameter, they would have to.
Okay. I must have got my wires crossed on some previous applications, but still, Mrs. Sutcliffe, you have taken this into consideration that, you know, if you put your hedge in, it has to stay there for 5 years. And in this dry weather, I'm just afraid that, you know, we have to water things. We have an awful habit in North Norfolk of planting things, especially developers, large developers. They plant beautiful trees in the wrong time of the year, and unfortunately they don't get watered sufficiently. But still, that's not for you. That's just me making a comment because I think it's important. Now, Councillor Toy, you wish to speak. Was that all right, Liz? Sorry, Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to pick up a little bit further actually from what Councillor Lloyd was saying about the environment stuff, because actually, although they haven't written it in there, as someone who lives in a house with large windows that face south, I welcome the free energy and the free heat. If we look at historical buildings, old farmhouses, big historic houses, they put big windows in the south and smaller windows in the north. And this is good. This is good planning practice to do that. We have modern controls to control the light, which have been mentioned in here. And indeed, if you look at the property next door, it actually has a window on the 3rd floor, which we have no control over. And it has a conservatory on the front of the house as well. The distance further forward, yes, it's slightly further forward, but actually, if you look on street view, there is a picture, an older picture, when there is a hedgerow there and how it would sit in the street scene much better than we've got here with the open view. So actually, on balance, having seen the infill that's around, accepting the arguments, but that we can put control on them. I have one other concern, which I've seen happen too often, is the garage. That I see we've got removal of permitted development rights in the, or permitted development rights. I'd hate to see that turned into a holiday cottage. I've seen it happen too often. It's a garage, it gets turned into something else, and suddenly we've got a holiday cottage. So I'd like to see that protected in that area. Otherwise, I believe that would be an overdevelopment in that area and too much traffic coming out on the bend on that road. But having said all that, provided we can do that with the plan as it is, I would be happy to second that for you as well, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Finely balanced. I can see why it's been called and I can see why the approval has been given. I personally would just like to be reassured is that in planning, you don't have a right to view, but you have a right to sunlight and the overshadowing aspect and parts of the surrounding buildings, because you all know, winter sunsets earlier, etc., etc. And I do think there is a right to sunlight. Can that just be clarified for me, Jeff, if I may? Thank you.
In what, in regards to the fact that the scheme complies with?
Well,
with
we all
guidance?
know there have been, sorry to interrupt, I do apologise. We all know other schemes and applications have been refused because the sunlight does change and therefore overshadowing blocks the view from the right to sunlight because of the overshadowing. And, you know, we did have one not so long ago in South Reps where this was a major issue. And I'm just thinking here, it's been mentioned here in amenity, overlooking, overshadowing, overbearing impacts, loss of views. So can that just be clarified for my own sanity, if you like? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the report sort of, as you say, emphasises the consideration has been given to impacts on amenity, and that was part of that consideration. Overshadowing issues have been considered as part of that. I mean, you can see from the site layout in your report packs that particularly the bungalow to the rear is quite well away from any neighbouring properties. Obviously, it's single story in size, so the shadowing issues there have been sort of managed and controlled. As the two-story property at the front as well, that's given the orientation, it's not considered likely to cause overshadowing concerns that would warrant a refusal.
Okay, I can't ask for any more, but obviously to me, it was a valid point because of the movement of the sun during the seasons and everything else. I just wanted to make sure that that had been taken into consideration. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll be very brief because everything's already been covered. I've listened very carefully to this application, superbly presented as always. When we make a decision on any planning, I do believe it's we have to take it on its own individual merit, among other things, and that's very important, something that we mustn't forget. Taking the light, it's a very important thing, especially in Blakeney, that's been covered, and I do believe one of the lights have been removed, as it says in the report, among other things. The way the building sits with the rest of it, I've seen the diagram. I think there's no problem with that. It is a rather stagnated skyline anyway. They're all different, is that correct? And I don't see a problem with it. Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify. No, two points is fine. I just wanted to pick up a couple of points that have been raised during discussion, so I can help clarify that. Just firstly, in terms of the garage to plot two, there was concern expressed that could it become separated away and used as a holiday use. Now, clearly, that would be a material change in use. There are planning controls in place to manage that, so we wouldn't necessarily need to have a condition to secure that, because it would need permission anyway to do that. So hopefully that allays members' fears. And just some points that have been raised about responding to a climate emergency. I don't know whether you're aware that there have been changes to the building regulations that came into force in June this year. So that has significantly changed the game for house builders particularly. I think it takes full effect next June, but it is in force now. So that will obviously influence how people develop their sites. Obviously, glazing is going to be one of those things that I'm sure it will look at in detail. I'm waiting for an update from my building control surveyor colleague for our teams in planning on that, because obviously building control implications could impact how we deliver housing schemes across North Norfolk. So that could influence the design of buildings and the local vernacular that we have. So it might be something that we could consider for member training if once I've had the feedback from building control.
So thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from that, do I take it that we're relying on building regulations as they will be amended and moving forward, improved as it were, to install smart glass, which I think has been suggested by the North Coast Partnership in the report, to mitigate light pollution? Or does it need to be conditioned in?
Can I try and help? It's got an electrostatic layer in it that when you charge it, it goes dark. They use it in tall buildings. Yeah, it's been around for many years, but only recently been discovered here. But essentially, yes, when it gets dark, you can have a sensor like you would, where people have outside lights dawn to dusk and things like that, which obviously we're moving away from now. We can use those same sensors and it electrically charges this sheet within the glass and it turns it dark or opaque. It can change it, put colours in it, do all sorts of things. That's why it's called smart. Okay.
Gerard, you've raised your hand. Oh, well, do you want to answer that one? But wait a minute, Gerard.
I'm just conscious there was a second question to Councillor Brown's
right.
question was about reliance on building control or whether we need a condition.
Right.
I think given that the applicant has suggested that be secured, I would prefer to have that as a condition because I don't believe the building control would go to that level of detail to secure that element. So if the applicant's willing to do that and it helps the committee in their decision making, I think we should secure that by a condition.
So we need to add that to the list of recommendations to the Assistant Director of Planning.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we need to make sure it's clear in the decision
Yeah.
that that's what we're expecting to see on the scheme.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, it's a bit like reactor light spectacle lenses, isn't it? Yeah, they go dark sort of automatically.
Some of the other glasses as well that the applicant's talking about here is that it's effectively like a one-way. It'll let the light in but not out by having that tint on it. There are lots of different products out there. And I think for us to decide, obviously that the level of technical knowledge varies. I think we need to let the specialists, we need to specify what it is we want to see as a result, and then let the specialists decide on the best way to do it, would be my suggestion, Madam Chair.
Yes, that's up. So it's
Agreed.
up to the specialist to make the decision. Okay, is that perfectly okay?
We
We
will,
don't need to alter the conditions then.
well, we can place a condition, but we won't go to the minutiae of detail that we get in that condition. We'll obviously get that agreed as part of that discharge.
Okay.
That's okay, Madam Chair. I'm soaking it all in. It's a question actually to the officers. I'm looking at the relevant policies and like Councillor Lloyd has already stated, I'm a bit surprised that what the EN6, Sustainable Construction and Energy Efficiency, isn't on the list really, because as Councillor Lloyd has already said, the impact on the environment, all new development, I believe, as I'm sure he does, you should have all of this. You know, I'm surprised there's no solar panels. I don't know what type of boiler or heating is going to be used. Maybe someone can clarify that for me. I know this is probably not relevant because we're basically talking about the size of the development, but it's something I think is very, very important nowadays when a planning application comes in. We should be trying to push these policies, you know, solar panels, heat source pumps, I keep going on about them. But I'm surprised it's not actually in the relevant policies. There's EN4, EN2, EN8, EN9, but no EN6. Is there a reason for that?
Okay, so when you look at I don't know if you've got EN6 in front of you, but I mean, it describes a set of criteria that we're looking for all new developments, but that was drafted, obviously this local plan is quite a number of years old now. So this is when we had things like code for sustainable homes, different levels for dwellings to meet. That has been removed as a requirement for development. But obviously the new building regulations has significantly moved things on from that point when the local plan was drafted. So that's why we've not raised it as a relevant plan policy, because it wouldn't be something that we would be applying to the scheme. The other aspects of EN6 really relates to schemes over 1,000 square for the largest of the schemes. That, yeah.
My point, Jeff, really is, I suppose it's a question to all the officers really. Do you actually push when applications come in, new applications where they're washing down a building, building a new one? Do you actually go beyond what building regulations state, or do you try and push solar panels, heat source pumps, that type of thing, or is that down to the applicant?
I think all of us as planners obviously recognise the climate emergency. We don't do the planning job just to kind of drop things to the lowest standards. We try and enhance things and act in the wider public interest. So obviously responding to a climate emergency is in the wider public interest, and obviously we try to seek where we can the best we can get from the site. Also, we work in a policy framework, so we can't we have to be mindful of the legality of the decision that we make and the policy frame that we work within. At the minute, our policies are out of date. I'll just explain the position on policy EN6. So in some ways, we are reliant on building regs acting as the sort of the minimum standard that we would expect developments to be built to. Clearly, we would like people to build things to the highest standards possible. That isn't always achievable or financially viable on some schemes. But yes, we are as officers doing our best to try and push that. Obviously, when we get the new local plan through examination, that gives us extra teeth to work with in terms of decision making. But yeah, hopefully that sort of answers the question.
Yes, it does. I mean, surely it's the applicants as well. It's in their best interest because if you're going to save money in the future, so I would imagine they would probably do their best to do that sort of stuff. So thanks for that, Jeff.
I think the applicants are fully aware of the climate change considerations that are taking progress. And I do believe you are considering in time to move into the bungalow itself. Is that right? This will be your home. So the overshadowing, which in fact I brought up in the pre-meeting, they will, Mr. and Mrs. Sutcliffe will have considered this because Nigel, the overshadowing, because obviously it will affect them. So climate change, yes. And I'm pleased to see you're working with the officers over this and the various ways in which you can mitigate the effect. Right, anybody else wish to speak? I think we've nearly gone through the whole members here. A little bit of crosstalk here. Right, anybody? No, nobody else. Then we'll go to the vote. We have a proposer to go with the officer's recommendation to approve, subject to the conditions, which have been slightly amended, I believe, as listed on page 26. So proposed by Councillor Lloyd, seconded by Councillor Toy. So we now go to the vote. Are we just doing hands?
No, I'll read out names and
Okay.
it'll be a recorded vote as usual for Development Committee. Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Fisher.
4.
Councillor Grove Jones.
4.
Councillor Heinrich.
4.
Councillor Holiday.
Against.
Councillor Kershaw.
4.
Councillor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
4.
Councillor Pearce.
4.
Councillor Toy.
4.
Councillor Withington. 4. And Councillor Yusimi.
4.
So that is 11 votes for, 1 against. The vote is carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay, but I would imagine you'll be willing to get back home. Thank you. Right, this is over. This is called the Jeff Lyon Show. So over to you, Mark.
I'm here all week. Okay, so this is agenda item 9 on development management performance update. I've tried to keep this relatively light. The box is probably the main bit that's got the information that you want to look at, which is our sort of performance for the period of June this year. So we've got a couple of major decisions, all within time or with agreed extensions of time, and 112 development management or other decisions. So our performance is improving. We've had a good couple of weeks recently as well, where we've got quite a number of applications out on time and within agreed extensions of time. So our sort of reporting performance that we report back to government is certainly on an upwards trajectory rather than on a downwards trajectory, which is good. Particularly given the workloads that we have at the moment. So I'm sort of pleased that the teams are able to progress things on that. Also in the report, I've included our list of current Section 106 obligations. So just an update so you can see where we are with the current legal obligations. The number's pretty healthy. Things are sort of generally under control. So thanks to Fiona Croxton, she acting as for East Law on those legal agreements. So yeah, we're pretty good position so far on that. So happy to take any comments for you, Chair.
Any comments from the members on the report? Oh, yes, John?
Yeah, no, just, oh, crikey, that's loud, isn't it? Was it? Shall I talk quietly? Is that better? Yeah, just thanks to officers for keeping going and maintaining performance through this difficult time of neutrality, and I think it's appreciated by everybody that they're up against it and they're working hard and working with everybody else. So thank you.
Yes, of course, it's not just nutrient neutrality, it's COVID situation and everything else. Short staff. They're little bricks, but we don't tell them that because they might get big headed.
I should be pleased to pass on the thanks to the team because yeah, they're working very hard. So yeah, it's nice to get that feedback. Thank you.
And now again, over we go, Jeff.
Okay, so item 10, appeals. I'm happy to respond to any sort of I expect we may get a question about Arcady, so I'll update about that one. So we were due to have a public informal hearing in October, but I think that's now been pushed back to late January. So yeah, yes, it keeps getting delayed. I think it's frustrating for everybody. It's we just
The what?
I mean, we're entirely led by the planning inspector on this one. Obviously, the late information that came from the applicants didn't help, which has obviously led to the delays. So obviously, we need to consider all our options on that. But yeah, late January is the date. So okay, and we asked. You're probably going to ask me about Kelling. Hi, Kelling.
No, I'm not going to talk about High Kelling. It just seems to me the way that these bunch of documents have been presented to NNDC late by Arcady is just a delaying issue. And my concern is this taken into consideration by the planning inspector to make sure that we don't run out of time? Because it seems to me that this is just a purely delaying tactics, and that concerns me greatly.
Well, I mean, that's something obviously we need to consider carefully, because the last thing we would want is for, as you say, the time period for enforcement to lapse. I'd like to think the inspector are alive to that issue, but obviously we'll make sure.
Can we make sure they are?
Make sure they are. Yeah, because clearly we want the situation resolved for everybody's benefit. We don't. It can't carry on. So.
Anything else, anybody?
Holidays.
Yes, Jeff, through you, Madam Chairman. I was going to say virtually the same as regards Arcady. It is a running saw, and if that wants to be minuted, that's fine. I was obviously also concerned at the delay in tactics, because that's what it appears to be. Quotes. We can't run out of time, but obviously I know Jeff, and I think it would be prudent for the committee and for the public there to say, that the officers themselves are probably very perplexed and very frustrated at this, the course of events, because this goes across the board, across everything. And I think everybody here, including yourself and probably Philip, would like to see this resolved. I mean, you've got no idea now, January. Do you think we're going to get more papers and documents to delay it even further? Just give us an honest opinion. That's all I can ask you for at this stage.
I mean, I can't put myself in the minds of the applicant in terms of how they're managing their. I mean, I'd like to think they've provided all the information that's now required to proceed. I can't see the reason why they would have for additional information at a late stage. But I mean, yeah, but that's a matter for the inspectorate to manage that, because I mean, this is probably not the first case the inspectorate had to deal with where there's obviously someone's home's at stake, and obviously that person obviously doesn't want to lose their home. Anyone in that situation wouldn't want to lose their home, but obviously you can't have a situation where someone's allowing to game the system to gain an advantage, and that's not in the public interest for that to happen. So obviously we will convey that message to the inspectorate to make sure that that this informal hearing can happen as soon as possible.
Okay, Jeff. I mean, no one is. It's not black and white. We all know that, but it's across the board here. We all see the situation. And I think we're all getting if I said frustrated rather than fed up at the longevity of what's going on, I think that would be a fair comment.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Whilst being fully sympathetic to the applicant's position, the community is voicing concerns about this. The fact, the delay, the conjoining of the different appeals, the complexity of the case, and they really feel that there should be some pushback, some quite strong pushback on the Arcady case. And there's also some community feedback on the Blakeney, the new Blakeney Wells, the pastures, about the way that this has come through. It's out of time and it's come through in a different format than a householder application, is my understanding, and there's some community disquiet about that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, just on that other Blakeney case, yes, I'm aware there's been, I know a couple of my team members have been speaking to the public about that. Again, this is a matter for the planning inspector because they are in control of whether they accept or decline to consider an appeal. We don't have it. Whilst we can express our opinion to the inspector, at the end of the day, we don't have that sort of casting vote as to whether something is accepted. We've had a number of cases over the years where what we'd expect is the normal timeframes haven't always been kept to by the inspectorate. So we've had enforcement appeals or other things that have gone ahead when we expected them not to have been submitted in time. But so that's again another matter for the inspectorate to consider. I mean, obviously they're getting a new chief exec fairly soon, so I wonder whether there'll be any changes to their procedures and practice on following that. But yeah, all we can do is express, if we have concerns, express them to the inspectorate so they know our view as a district council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's frustrating. I mean, I'm actually looking at, I have looked over the performance measures that we've had over the last couple of meetings, and they're actually going really, really in the right way. My frustration is that valuable officers' time is being used on basically skating uphill because, I mean, I presume you have to go along for the ride. If you're being frustrated by late applications and all this sort of stuff, I mean, how much time do you actually think you waste in general? Because my frustration is the valuable officers' time. There's no monitoring of how much of it is wasted on some of these ridiculous applications. I know you probably have to go along for the ride, but is there a point where you say, well, hang on, this is what costing us too much officers' time? We could be better spend time on genuine, proper applications, get them done quicker, and you know, draw some sort of a stop on these wasteful ones because you're wasting your valuable time.
I mean, it's worth pointing out our appeal record as an authority is exceptional. I mean, we've got a really good track record on appeals. We win most of the ones that we're challenged on. So we're doing well in that side in terms of decision making we're doing, but the process for deciding that appeal, yeah, that can be frustrating, not just for North Norfolk, but for lots of the country. We're all suffering the same sort of length of time of delays of resolving appeals, and that frustrates the public and others because we just want to see due process followed as quickly as possible. I mean, I wouldn't want to see a situation where we give up on appeals because obviously that could put the authority at risk. We could end up with a decision that we don't want to see happen. But you're right, it does take a lot of officer time, and I don't think we readily capture the time that we spend on that. I mean, that's a point for me to take away is how do we capture and record the amount of officer time involved in appeals? Because actually, if someone has behaved unreasonably, we need to be able to put a cost claim in for that unreasonable behaviour. And in order to do that, we need to have an understanding of how many hours we've spent on that appeal. So it all goes hand in hand. And actually, if we can recover some of the costs, and that obviously helps us with our budgets and perhaps gets us some temporary staff in to help with any sort of workload peaks. But yeah, the point isn't lost. I mean, I completely agree. There's a lot of time and effort expended by the team on appeals. Most of it to good success, but yeah, there are times when it is frustrating.
Before I go to you, Councillor Pearce, I would just like to ask, what is the time factor for appeals? Is there a maximum amount of time?
This is where you're testing me on my memory. For all different times.
That's why I'm asking you, because I can't remember.
In most cases, it's a 6-month time window, but for householder appeals, it's a shorter time frame. I think, on top of my memory, it's 12 weeks. So there is a shorter time frame for householder appeals.
Right, and then for the appeals inspector, how much time are they allowed to discuss and consider the appeals?
Well, I mean, the context for the whole planning process, the government a couple of years ago talked about the planning guarantee. So that was 6 months for the local planning authority to make their decision, and then 6 months for the planning inspectorate to make their decision. So the idea was that if you submitted an application today, by this time next year, if you had to go through the appeal route, you'd have an appeal decision. Now, I think it's not rocket science. We know that that time frame isn't being met. But that's, I mean, for me, in terms of managing the development management team, that's part of the work I'm doing, is to make sure we can meet our part of the guarantee and to get good decisions made quickly. But obviously I can't control what the inspectorate do and how they resource that. I mean, it's well known they've had resourcing issues and difficulties getting hold of inspectors, just like we've had difficulty getting hold of planning officers to pick up the caseload.
Yes, thank you. I think we can say quite comfortably that the 1 year situation is overturned time and time again, but still, there we are. We have to consider all the reasons why people are putting in an appeal, and it's to our credit at North Norfolk that the officers do consider all factors. I now go to Councillor Pearce, then Councillor Toy, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You'll be pleased, hopefully, that it's a different subject. Can I, with your diligence, because I did want to say something, go back to the S106 agreements page, Jeff. Is there anything further you can add for me on the one for the land at Back Lane at Rowton? Because that has also been another thing with the whole general area that's considerably protected through various agreements. And I happen to personally think that the erection of these houses and dwellings is a good scheme. But obviously there are other factors tied into it. And I know you've got the nutrient neutrality situation as well. But if you can just give us a couple of words or a little update, that would be very helpful.
As you say, it has been impacted by the nutrient neutrality decision. I know things have been ongoing on that one. I mean, this is on the list because we started to draft an agreement, but obviously it hasn't had a resolution to approve either through delegated powers or through committee yet. So yeah, there's still a way to go. I know the applicant is trying to resolve those drainage issues. But yeah, I can't say it's going to come to a committee on this date or whether you as local member grant delegated approval.
But it isn't just waiting on nutrient neutrality though, is it? There are other issues that are lying with it as well.
I think they sort of, a lot of those do stem back to nutrient neutrality impacts. I mean, I just say I don't want to necessarily use this as a. I mean, I can happily have a chat with you outside of the committee. I don't think it's necessary. Yeah.
It wasn't to crucify anybody. It was just noting the fact.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, going back to the planning inspectorate, do we make representations when we think they're taking too long appropriately? You know, I know obviously challenging the inspectorate is a challenge in itself because we don't want to get on the wrong side of them, but do we make the best effort that we can to represent our side of things for the process?
Yes, I would say yes, we do. And an example of that on page 32, we have the Kelling informal hearing, which we had in March. And we would have hoped to have received a decision by now, but we haven't. And we have asked the inspectorate, obviously, say politely, not wanting to wind them up, but asking them the question. And yeah, so we do ask questions. So yeah, we want to know because we want to be able to move on from that decision and consider any fallout from that.
That's great, thank you. It's just that people understand that you do take actions and we don't just sit and wait. But thank you.
It's a bit like the probate system at the moment. Don't even go there. Andrew.
Yeah, Madam Chair, a bit like the whole country at the moment, actually, if I just expand on that point. I just want to go back to the planning inspector and the question of costs. I take it that we've notified the applicant that we will be looking to ask for an award of increased costs on account of their tactics in gaming the system. Is it sort of automatic if we lodge a justification for additional costs to the planning inspector? Do they rubber stamp it? Or are they like the court system? Do they sort of say, well, we're going to put it to a taxing master and go through every item of costs in addition to the standard costs that you would normally receive? How does that work, Jeff?
Okay, that's a multi-stranded question, that one, but
Well, no, I'm not. No, I don't want to be over forensic, just sort of in general principles.
I mean, in terms of making a cost decision, there is legislation and guidance in terms of how you can make a cost award and what the other party would have to do to constitute unreasonable behaviour. So I don't really want to go into detail on the Kelly case because obviously we're being recorded and I don't want to sort of put anything into question on that. Obviously, we don't have to notify the applicant now. Obviously, we're still in the process of going to an inquiry. So as long as we get that in front of an inspector, it's the inspector who would make that decision. They would look at the cost award and they would give the other side a chance to respond, just like you would do for any other inquiry. But they would make a separate cost decision. So the decision would be separate to the planning appeal decision. And they would come to their view whether they agree unreasonable behaviour has happened. In terms of the actual costs, I mean that's a whole art in itself in terms of how do you apportion costs and justify what your bills are. And there are businesses out there that will look at things for us. So it'll just be if the inspector were to award in our favour, then we'd have to come to an agreement with the other side in terms of what those reasonable costs are. I'm hoping it won't be £3 million as a cost for the